Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for helping in. It's a great pleasure to have you here. My name is Verónica. I'm a radiography medical student in my third year, based in Nigeria. Apart from my medical studies, I'm also a freelance medical content writer. Today I have an amazing guest speaker. Hey, Lawson, could you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. So my name is Veronica Lawson Vilches. I am a content writer. I'm a writer, ghostwriter, PR specialist, and communication specialist. I'm the founder of my company called The Word on Record, and I work with purpose-driven CEOs, founders, coaches, and companies in getting their message across about the impact that they want to do in this world. And so, yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It's great to have you here. Lawson, are you ready for these questions I have for you to, answer for the audience?
Yes, I'm ready for all of your questions.
All right, the first question goes this way. As a multilingual content writer, right, and speaker also,
Yes.
how do you approach crafting messages, that resonates with a diverse audience globally? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I speak English, Spanish. They are both my native languages. My dad is from the United States, my mom is from Spain. So in our household, we grew up with speaking both languages. And funnily enough, even though I was born in the United States, my first language is Spanish. And then I also speak French and Italian. I lived in France for 7 years, and now I am living in Italy. And so, yeah, I'm a multilingual writer and speaker. I would say that how I try to get my message across that resonates with a global audience. It's understanding that, even though you speak a language, that doesn't mean that other people in the world speak it the same way as you do. As an American, I have little ticks in the way that I speak, expressions in the way that I speak that someone like someone from the UK does not have. And so I work with clients from the UK. I've worked with American clients, and that is one of the first things that I get across with them. As their ghostwriter, I listen to them thoroughly, ask them about, specific expressions that they've said to me, so that I understand if it's something that we want to put into the writing or not. As for my writing, I try to come about it with like a neutral aspect, understanding that the way I speak Spanish or the way that I speak English is not the same way that they speak somewhere else in the world. So even though I grew up in the United States, a lot of our friends were from Latin America. I had friends from Mexico. I had friends from Ecuador. So certain phrases or certain words that mean something for me can mean something different for them. And so it's just understanding that we have to be very open in the way that people in the world think, the way that they express themselves differently, because if we want to get a message across, we have to understand the aspects behind that as well. And so that's why when I write, even though I may have a little bit of my takes from, my Spanish or from my English, I try to be as neutral as possible and come with an understanding that some ways that I express myself are differently in the world. And to understand that that there's going to be a diverse public that reads it. So it's very interesting. The reason I like to learn languages as well is because of this. I think it opens completely a different world inside of you, but also thought processes, and you can understand by learning languages why people think the way that they do, and then you have newer ways of expressing yourself. And so, yeah, that's super for me. That's super interesting, and it's why I love learning languages.
I believe that the audience grabs something from this now. You just need to have, you know, learn other languages because of if you're a writer, because you're gonna meet, you don't know who your client's gonna be. It can be a Spanish, it can be anybody from other countries. So you just have to learn, not deeper in the language, just know the basics, right? So thank you so much for
Yeah,
explaining that
yeah.
for us. So you work with CEOs, right?
I have worked with CEOs. Yes.
All right. So could you share some tips for purpose-driven CEOs, founders, and coaches on finding their voice, and making a meaningful impact through their content? So what are your takes?
Yeah, so I've worked with CEOs who work in their native languages, and I've also worked with CEOs who don't work in their native languages. And to find their voice, I think the first thing that they need to think about is just when they write, or when I write for them, when I do the ghostwriting for them, it's to really write the way that they speak, because that is your voice, and the way that you have to express yourself is very important. And then if you're going to be doing purpose driven, I think you really have to be speaking on things that passion you. You have to have passion behind it, because if not, the way you express yourself, the way it's going to come across, you can tell when there is no passion behind a post or the way it's been written. So, and specifically for impact purpose driven ideas and such, you really just have to have some passion behind what you're doing. And then, yeah, I've worked for like the CEOs who are working in a second language to them. I've always told them, you're being courageous. The fact that you're potentially building your career in a language that is not yours, and you have to really hold on to that, because that courage is super amazing. And understand that the way you have to express yourself may be a little bit different than the way that in that certain language is. When I worked in France and I had to prove myself that I did speak French, it is stressful, but I also understand that it's something that I can bring differently, the different ways of expressing myself. I have a different voice, quote unquote, than a normal French person, because it's not my native language, but that can be a plus, and it's a courageous thing. And so for people who are building careers in a language that isn't theirs, like, hold on to that. And understand that what you're doing is very courageous as well, and that your voice, even though it may not be your native language, needs to be heard, and you do have a voice and you should share it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much for expatiating on that question. And, how do you integrate gender equality initiatives into your work, and what is important for developers, solve social problems through their content? What are your take on that?
Yeah, so I mean, as a woman, I have lived some some things that I think are based on sexism. And so I like to speak up about it, as I think our voices are very important, and if you have a platform, to use it. I also think that a lot of the times we think that gender equality has been reached. I just think that what we've done is there's different aspects now to that gender equality. So there's more women in the workplace, but we also have to understand if there's more women in the workplace. And I think we saw this a lot during the pandemic, is like also the house important was on the woman, right? So we have women working, but also having to take care of the household. And we need to have these conversations. And so developers and founders and companies need to have this in their mindset as well. And as I've entered the workforce, I've often seen, and it sometimes feels as a woman, that there's certain companies that are like, wait, we've reached the 50-50, we are a diverse company, but then it's also, what are the actions within that company that they are taking to hear the women within their company? And that also is very important. You just cannot reach that quota and then be like, we've done it, we're equal, basta. Like, that does not work. You have to make sure that you're also within that parity, making sure you're hearing women and giving them that equal space within the company. And so that's why I talk about these issues, because I find it so important. These are things that women live day to day. And I think these are conversations that do need to be had. And women need to talk about how they're feeling it, the way that they've lived it. And yeah, and so I think we women have a voice, and if we have a platform and we feel strong enough to be able to talk about it, we should.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the fact that you are like a voice for the voiceless, because there are other people out there that don't really speak out, you know. So I believe that using your platform, to talk about that gender equality is really very, very important. Very, very important. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Yeah, and I kind of just want to add too that I've worked also with organizations and nonprofit organizations for women who have survived sexual assault, sexual abuse, domestic violence, and those conversations too. We make it a taboo in our society, and they are conversations that I believe need to be had. so that we can see changes also too in other aspects that we women live day to day. And so, yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate your kind words.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. So, what was your journey in establishing, your perspective as a content creator, and how does it affect your stories to tell?
Wow, my journey has been somewhat long. So, I always, since I was little, I always wanted to write. Like I was 3 years old, I had my little journal and I was scribbling. I couldn't write, but I would just scribble circles and I'd see that, that's what writing was. And that's, how you would tell stories. And so I've always wanted to be a writer, and I've had this very clearly since I was 3 years old. I've always wanted to tell stories. The older I got, I wanted to be a journalist. And so when I was 18, I opened up my first blog. I mean, I was in high school and I was just like, I'll talk about things that are important to me, in which, I was talking about sexism and equality. And but at an 18-year-old standpoint, from high school. And then at 19, I moved to France, and that blog became much more about my travels in France. Excuse me, about my travels in France and Europe and what it was like learning a new language and tips to learn a new language. Um, and so I'm sorry, we can hear the echo. I'm gonna put on my headphones so that potentially in the recording we don't hear it. I was hearing an echo, and so I was like, oh. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And so, yeah, so I had that blog, and then I went to university. I was writing so much for university that it was kind of hard to maintain that. And so I stopped writing as much as I used to, and closed down that blog. And then I think it was really during the pandemic that a lot of us kind of understood, life is precious. Everything can be taken away from us in a second. And during the pandemic, during one of the lockdowns, and the first lockdown in France, I was really reflecting on how I wanted to be more of a writer. And I had just kind of given up a lot of that just to have like, the 9 to 5 career and have a stable position. And so I started writing again, and specifically about like experiences I had in France and difficulties I had had. But it really felt really good. And I felt like I kind of had finally found truly what I wanted to do, which was use my voice and speak up and talk about issues that I tend to find a taboo. And so that's kind of why my career evolved, and why I started the Word on Record. I mean, I did that 2, 3 years after the pandemic, but it was a long process in the way of, really trying to find my voice and finding specifically what I thought I wanted to do. And it's evolved even when I started my company. I was just going to be like just ghostwriting, but then I really have a passion too of working with journalists and writing. And so it's really evolved, and I really like the way it has. And so I think my advice to anyone who is starting out, would be to allow that evolution to grow even in ways you don't think it could have, or ways that you were not expecting, and to be very open and receiving to that, because it really holds a lot of surprises for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Whoa, that was an amazing story you shared right there. Thanks for that,
Thank you.
Lawson.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to ask another question. As a multilingual personality, how do you use your different languages, right,
Mm-hmm.
to connect with people in different countries in the world? So what are your take on that?
I so I think it, kind of goes back to your first question. I just think by like learning a new language, you can learn so much about yourself and so much about other people and the way that they think. I really think it's like, a bridge between nationalities, between cultures, between us humans. So, for example, I've worked with people from Portugal or from Brazil, and I always try to like, learn 2, 3 words from their language, even though I don't speak Portuguese, but to, kind of show as a respect of like, okay, I know that the meeting is going to be in English. because that's the language that we both speak, but I do want them to see that kind of sign of respect in which I've made an effort to know two, three words from their language expressions. And I just think it's a sign of it's a sign of respect. And then it's just, being open to the way that other people think, and just being open to learning. Yeah, again, I just think languages really, if we make an effort, can be a bridge to understanding each other a little bit more. I find that so important.
Amazing. Well, it's just to what I learn is if you want to learn some, languages out there, you need to know the deeper aspect. As far as you can understand the basics, you can write, you can, talk, something like that, you're good to go.
Yeah,
So as a
yeah,
writer,
yeah.
learn, yeah.
Learning. And I think so one of the languages I would absolutely love, I speak four already and it's already like crazy in my head, but one of the languages I would love to learn is Arabic. And why do I want to learn Arabic? It's because I think, Spanish and Arabic share so many words. And not a lot of people, if you're not, if you're a Spanish speaker, you tend to know this. There's a history between Spain and the Arabic world. And so for me, it's like if I learn Arabic, I even understand a little bit more of my own language. And I just find it so beautiful, this way to connect with other people, and also understanding ourselves even more. And Spanish and Italian share a lot of words and grammar, and the same with French, because they come also from Latin, right? So it's for me, it's just, yeah, it's understanding the world a little bit more, and then again just connecting with humans, and it's so important. And I think really, yeah, it's just that's how we can learn the differences, our different backgrounds, and understand people a little bit more. At least that's how I hope, that's how I view the world, and I wish more people viewed it that way. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I want to ask something.
Hmm.
Languages differs, right? The
Yeah.
kind of French France speak, Paris they speak French, right?
Yeah.
But there is a country in Africa named Cameroon,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
They speak French, but the French is kind of like different from
Hmm.
those French Paris people, French people speak or something. So I want to know, for instance, Brazil and Portugal. Brazil they speak Portuguese, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So Portugal, they speak Portuguese, right? And so I want to know, these two countries are different, and they kind of like speak the same language or something, Portuguese. But is there any difference in that kind of language they speak? Is there any difference or something?
I mean, I don't speak Portugal. I know it's Portugal. I don't speak Portuguese. Sorry. I can hear it slightly in the way, like the intonation, when I've heard Portuguese from Brazil, or Portuguese from Portugal. I've heard like intonation differences, but specific words I can't tell you. Um, I can tell you, as a Spanish speaker, I had friends growing up that were from Ecuador. For an example, I'll tell you a story. I was little, and this mom was telling me, "Párate," and parar means stop in Spanish. And so, in my Spanish, in the Spanish from Spain. So, when she was like, "Párate, párate," and I was like freezing, and she was getting frustrated with me because I was sitting down and she wanted me to stand up. And so then my mom had to go in and be like, "No, Veronica, stand up." And so it's not that we can't understand each other, obviously. And it's like English from the UK and English from the US. There's just going to be a slight differences in words, that you have to be, open about, and be like, "Oh, wait, what do you mean?" Because in my country we say it this way, but then, and you say it this way, and why is that? And being open to understand that there's going to be different words, same words, but for different things. And they always lead to funny stories, but it's also very, very eye-opening.
Absolutely. Thank you for that,
Yeah.
Lawson. So I want to know something. Can you give us an example of a project, right, or campaign where you successfully, used storytelling, because I know you're very good in storytelling. So to advocate for a cause close to your heart. So tell us that project you did that was so successful based on
Um,
storytelling.
Yeah, so I have a few. So I've worked in PR for a few companies, and the companies I've tended to work for have been projects that I've really been passionate about, and I've been really lucky to work for companies to have that opportunity to start my career in companies where I really liked what they were doing. And a lot of the times, what I would do is use the storytelling. So like use the story of the founder to pitch that story to journalists so that they would be like, okay, I really need to write about this. And so, yeah, I've done that for different companies, and I've gotten them into some of the biggest newspapers of the country. So for like Spain, I've gotten the company I worked for their Spanish press. I got them into La Vanguardia. And then, you know, for a French company I worked with, I got them into the biggest newspaper like Ops and Le Parisien, and I even got them into the biggest news channel. So I really used my storytelling to connect with journalists because that's also like the way that they write, right? They need to have that story that captures them. And then again, I don't know if this would really be storytelling, but I work with a nonprofit organization called Voices Beyond Assault in the United States, which is helping women, actually not just women, but survivors, so women, men, in non-binary that have survived sexual assault and domestic violence. And so I, for a while, was running their French Instagram, and that was also using a lot of like statistics and sharing stories of survivors so that we can raise awareness around, you know, what it is to survive something so difficult.
That was an amazing project that was so successful. Thanks so
Thank
much for
you.
that. So this is the last question, Lawson.
Yeah, I'm ready for the
Before we
last
go into
question.
before we go into the last question, um, I want you to speak a Spanish language first. And once you speak a Spanish, you translate it in English. I want to
You
learn
want
something new from you.
You want me to answer in Spanish, or do you want me to just say like a phrase in Spanish?
Yeah, like a phrase in Spanish and then interpret in English for us to learn something.
Okay. I'm sorry, my Italian is coming in. Me he divertido tanto.
What does that
Me,
mean?
that means I've had a lot of fun. Me he divertido tanto. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Because
Yeah.
there are also Spanish people that are gonna watch this video and they're gonna tell me if you're right or you're wrong.
They might tell you, so this might be what they tell you. They'll probably say, "Oh, she has an Italian accent now." So when I was in Spain over the summer for a wedding, I had a lot of family members tell me like, "Oh, your Italian is seeping through your Spanish now," and I'm like, "Spanish is my first language. I can't lose it." So if they say anything, it's probably like, "Does she really speak Spanish?" Y sí, de verdad puedo hablar español. Os lo juro.
That's amazing. I hope you haven't forgotten your American accent.
No, so funnily enough, I was in the United States recently for the holidays, and a few people were like, "Where are you from?" And I was like, "I'm from the States." But there are specific words that I know that I say with an accent now that I can't say with the American accent because it feels weird to me now. Yeah, I've had a few clients that are like, "Oh, wow, you really picked up the European accent," where I'm like, "European." But you know, they're like, "Oh, well, Italian." I'm like, "Oh, okay," but I don't think so. But you
I
know,
thought you were Italian, though. I thought you were an Italian because of your accent.
you really no.
But
No, I just live in
right.
Italy.
Wait, have you traveled to the UK or Europe? Have you been there before?
To the UK? Yeah, I was actually in London a year ago for Thanksgiving, so like in November of 2022. Yeah, I love the UK. And I was supposed to study in Scotland for a semester abroad because I studied in Paris and I wanted to do a semester abroad in a country that spoke English because it was very tiring to study everything in French. That was not my native language.
Why why
Yeah.
did you study in your country, the US?
So I moved to Paris when I was 19 as an au pair, which is
Oh,
a babysitting. So it's like you're a babysitter, but you live with family. And while I was in France, I really liked living there. I loved the language. I wanted to learn it more. And then so I stayed a second year. And then I was like, I'll apply to university and see if I get in. And I got in. So I studied there. And I'm really lucky because studying in Paris is not as expensive as it is in the United States. So I got a good education and I'm really happy and I got to live some great experiences abroad.
I'm not really happy with you, Lawson, because why did you travel to Paris? You should have come to Africa, Nigeria especially.
I really want to go to Africa. Like, I mean, there's so many countries in Africa that I would love to visit.
So whenever you come to Nigeria, just put a call. Just call me. I'll be there
Oh,
for you.
sounds good.
Yeah. So let's go to the last question. So we're in a digital age, right?
Hmm.
So where content is in abundance, there are too many content writers out there, too many content creators out there. So how do you ensure that your message stands out and leaves a lasting impression on the audience? So what are your perception about that?
So I think like I could give you like an answer being like pay attention to the hook and you have to have a grabbing attention of, like the first sentence. The spacing, pay attention to how, specifically if we're going to be talking about LinkedIn, there's a specific writing for LinkedIn as there is for like a blog post, etc. And so I could give you like those kinds of tips, but to be quite honest, I just think it's truly finding your voice. Yes, you have to have a great hook that it's going to grab the reader's attention, but it's also being true to yourself, having the passion behind what you are saying that really is going to resonate with the reader as well. So you can have a post where you've done everything the way, with all these tips that every influencer is giving us on how to grab that attention. But if you don't have that passion, if you don't have a little bit of yourself sprinkled into that post, I truly just don't think it's going to work because I think we've been in a digital age now for so long that I think we are missing that connection, that human connection between each other. And so I think that as of now, people are starting to want to see more actual authenticity, and people being true to themselves and having the passion that they say that they do. And so, yeah, I would just say to stay true to yourself, be authentic, be transparent as much as you can. And yeah.
Absolutely. So we've come to the end of the session, Lawson. So you've been an amazing, amazing, amazing guest speaker thus far. And thank you so much for honoring our invitation and, enlightening the audience. And yeah, so what are your last words for the audience before we wrap up the session totally?
My last words to the audience is I believe that we all have something to say. And so if you feel like you can say something, you can do something to do it. I think we all have something to give in this world. And yeah, use your platform for good.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. So if you love this content, do well to subscribe, like, comment, and share to your network. Hopefully, this video can touch someone in your network. So thank you so much, and I wait for my upcoming content to YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you so much.